If you're wondering why the 49ers don't draft offensive linemen early, we got an answer yesterday, and I imagine it's going to tick off a lot of you. Plus, another wide receiver has gotten paid. Is that going to affect the contract that hopefully Brandon Aiyuk gets from the 49ers? We'll talk about that and more on today's show. What is good, everybody? Welcome to another Gold Standard podcast on the Gold Standard Podcast Network, part of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm Rob Stats Guerrera here with you, flying solo today. Levin is off. He's on vacation, I think in the Outer Banks, but I'm not totally sure. So I'm going to handle things alone today. Hope to hear from a lot of you in the chat. As always, please rate, review, and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network. I always say, if you take the time to leave us a review, we will read it on the show. I have a couple here that I need to mention. Kyle Soder says, love the show, 5 stars. Thank you. Been listening for around 2 years, and I've loved the everyday coverage. 49ers in 5 is my go-to on the way to school, and while at work, I listen every day. Thank you so much, Kyle. We appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. Keep those ratings and reviews coming. They do help us. Stephen GV says, hot takes and cold truths, 5 stars. Robert Statistics, it is great hearing from you and Levin, the Truth Black, and the gang to help the faithful get through the week. We appreciate it. Love the pod. Thank you. Please keep those coming. All right. So what we're going to do here is a little different than what we normally do. Ooh, I like this. C. Pinky says, putting the kids to bed and can't listen, but here for the viewers count. Thank you very much from Austria. Appreciate that. Love when we go international on the show. All right. Levin's not here, so I don't have anybody to bounce stuff off of. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask Chris Foerster to help me out. I'm going to play some of Chris Foerster's press conference yesterday that has a lot of people very upset. And then I'll react to a little bit of it, and then I'll pause it, and we'll kind of go back and forth that way, because his comments encompassed a lot of the press conference. So we will take it up in pieces, and we'll see how it goes. John Veen says, I keep expecting water to come down from the ceiling or wall behind you. Sorry you're having to deal with that. Yeah, I just tweeted out a picture. So if you hear anything in the background, I apologize. There are people here working on my house because we had water just flood down from the ceiling the other day. And I'll put it up. If you're watching the stream right now, you can see the picture that I tweeted out. My house is a mess. We had water issues. We've lost our kitchen now. So there's people here doing all sorts of work. So if you hear anything in the background, I apologize. That's what's happening. Turns out water coming down from the ceiling, sort of a big problem. All right, let's get to Chris Foerster. Enough messing around here. Here's Forrester when asked why the 49ers haven't drafted an offensive lineman early.
My opinion, this is my personal opinion. If they ask me, invest in guys that touch the ball. Guys that can touch the ball and score touchdowns. And then there's a range of guys, 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, 5th round even, that we will find starting offensive linemen in. At some point, can you draft? Yeah, you draft Trent Williams. You draft the pick of draft where you're getting a difference maker. But there's guys that can make difference that touch the ball well into 2nd, 3rd, 4th rounds, or 2nd, 3rd rounds at least, and definitely in the 1st round. That guy that touches the ball, it makes a huge difference in the game. The right guard makes a difference. We've talked about it before, but that's why we're able to find 4th and 5th round draft picks. And if they've been,
all right, let's pause it there for a second. That's a pretty loaded statement, right? And he's couching it as his own opinion. I wouldn't be shocked if Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch share that opinion. But what he said was guys essentially that touch the ball are more impactful than guys that don't. Maybe that explains the Ricky Pearsall pick in the 1st round. We don't know, but it certainly would fit with what Chris Foerster is saying. And here's the thing, as frustrating as it is, he's kind of not wrong, right? I mean, the 49ers had arguably the best offense in the league last year, right? Christian McCaffrey led the league in rushing. Their offense, by a lot of metrics, was number 1 across the board. And the offensive line was who it was. So he's not totally wrong. I understand why people are mad and frustrated and upset, but the facts are the facts, and the 49ers have gotten to the Super Bowl twice in the Kyle Shanahan era, twice in the Chris Foerster era. So, the guy that's saying that these beliefs are his, there's evidence to support their opinion. Now, I know a lot of people were fired up on social media, and I get it because of how the Super Bowl ended last year. And look, we all saw Brock have to make up for a lot of offensive line shortcomings. But you're going to hear Chris Foerster sort of address that also. I think the 49ers would tell you they think it's worth it. I think that's what they would tell you. I don't know if I totally agree, especially with where the 49ers are in their team building, but perfect example. Who started at right guard when the 49ers made the Super Bowl in 2019? Off the top of your head. Probably don't know, right? I wouldn't have known for sure. It was Mike Person. We didn't know. Why? Because he was just one of those sort of guys the 49ers found and put in there and made it work with, right? And that's what Chris Foerster is arguing, right? He said it. We can find guys in the later rounds that are essentially good enough. Now, C. Pinky says, as long as we don't have to go against Chris Jones in the Super Bowl again, I trust him. I get it, but also like Chris Jones is Chris Jones because he's really good. There was nobody in this draft that was going to be able to block Chris Jones because he's the best in the league. So even if they had drafted a guy high, I'm not going to be like, oh, well, there's our Chris Jones answer, So I do kind of tend to go with the team. Let's listen to a little more Chris Foerster, and I can react to that as well.
You'll find, it's how dominant is the difference between pick, 34 versus pick 54 in offensive line play. And that's what you're trying to balance all the time. So will we best available player, all those types of things? Definitely will. And were we possibly ready to draft guys higher in the draft? Yes. But if there's somebody that can touch the ball and make plays, in my opinion, you asked me, Chris, do you want him? I want the guy that touches the ball for me, because I think we can develop those players much more readily and have developed those players through the times, because we do have a specific things that we're looking for. We know what we're looking for through the course of time. That's the advantage of being together with Kyle for so long, that we kind of can pigeonhole these guys. Are we always right? Heck, no, we're not always right. And nobody is on anything. So, yeah, could you put 5 first-rounders across the front? I don't know that we have to have success, and it hasn't been that case as far as running the football and protecting the quarterback.
Okay. Again, he's not wrong, right? They've gotten to 2 Super Bowls, so they've had enough success to get to the 2 Super Bowls. Now, they haven't won them. What I would say in response to Chris is, okay, you're right that you've been able to get to this level with this sort of offensive line philosophy. That's fair. I mean, you can't dispute it. Those are the facts. But I would say, but now you have the rest of the team, right? You have the Avengers. You have Deebo. You have Aiyuk. You have Kittle. You have McCaffrey and Bosa and Warner and Hufanga and all the guys. You know the names. The value of adding a Ricky Pearsall is maybe not as great as it would be as adding a good tackle, a really good guard, a really good center. And by the way, Dominic Pooney could be a really good guard. I don't know. But you could argue that there are diminishing returns. Like, hey, great, we've got 4 really good wide receivers. Does that help the team more than the second really good offensive lineman? I think you could make an argument the lineman would affect the team more. I don't know. I think it depends also on how good the wide receiver is that we're talking about, right? What if, and I'm not saying this is the case, but just go with me for the sake of the argument. What if Ricky Pearsall is, just as good as Cooper Kupp was with the Rams, right? Then you're like, damn, that's a question too. I think if the 49ers said, well, we could either draft Trent Williams or Cooper Kupp, they would probably take Trent Williams. But Forrester talked about it. He mentioned it. Like, if it's not Trent Williams and it's just like the 34th or 32nd best offensive lineman, I do think it's fair to make that comparison and ask yourself that question as a team that's drafting a player. I get that logic from Forrester. I really do. Let's see some of your comments here. Chad, YouTube channel member, says this is the part where not mortgaging the future at all bites us. Got to risk it for the biscuit. Tim Kawakami has talked about this a lot, how the 49ers are very conscious of the future and they don't want to mortgage the future. You could argue, I think I kind of agree with you, Chad, like maybe go for it. Maybe another championship game appearance is not, doesn't really do much for you if you had to sacrifice that to get to a Super Bowl. And by the way, we all thought the Rams were mortgaging the future, right? Oh, the Rams, they're trading these picks and they're mortgaging it all for a championship. Well, first of all, they got the championship. Second of all, they missed the playoffs for 1 year and then they were right back in the playoffs. So the team that we all used as the example of a team that was mortgaging the future forever sacrificed one season where they were massively injured also, by the way. So, sometimes we think we're mortgaging a future when we're really not. I mean, we probably all said the Niners were mortgaging the future with the Trey Lance deal, right? And they made the NFC Championship every year that they gave up a first-round pick. So sometimes I think we're too quick to say, hey, you mortgaged the future. That's not always true, even if sometimes it looks like that. Let's listen to a little more of Mr. Chris Foerster.
Do we have? Yeah, we don't have 5 first-rounders, so there's always going to be that. But the fact that you can throw a short pass to Deebo, even though the right tackle's getting beat, it ends up being a 60-yard touchdown. So, yeah, the right tackle blocks somebody, but if the guy gets tackled at 5 yards, you don't have the 60-yard touchdown. Boy, that right tackle did a great job. What's it matter if the guy touching the ball can't take it to the house? So there's the trade-off, and you're constantly playing that game.
That's, I think, his most compelling point right at the end there, right? Great. You have the guy, a really good offensive lineman, really good right guard. He blocks the hell out of a guy, and you get a 6-yard gain. I understand what he's saying there. He's right, I think. I think if you were starting a team from scratch, I would understand that philosophy. But as I said before, you already have Deebo. You already have Aiyuk. You've got 4 guys on the team, McCaffrey, Kittle, that can all take that 6-yard pass to the house. So is adding another one of those guys more valuable to you than improving your offensive line? I think improving the offensive line it would be more valuable, but that assumes that the lineman and the playmaker that you draft are equally as good. If the playmaker is way better than the lineman you could have gotten, then I think you take the playmaker, which is what I think the 49ers themselves would argue if you talk to them about what they did in this year's draft. So that's where I think Forrester was saying, and his explanation was there. I know a lot of people were upset about it. Levin was upset about it on social media, of course, tweeting about it from vacation. Let me see if I could bring some of those up. By the way, because I think a lot of people see the way the Super Bowl ended last year and they say, look at your offensive line. Look how much pressure Brock was under. You were always in 3rd and long. Isn't that a case of needing to go with the offensive line? But you could also say, hey, Spencer Burford went rogue in the Super Bowl. And that was the real problem. It wasn't that the offensive lineman wasn't good enough. It's that the offensive lineman didn't do the job that he was supposed to do. And they still, by the way, got to overtime in a Super Bowl and almost went to double overtime. So when I first heard it, I knew. See, so the way it works is like, he's having the press conference. I see the tweets from the 49ers beat writers. And I'm like, you're reading the quotes and you're like, oh man, this is going to go over like a lead balloon. Like I could tell that people are going to be mad at Chris Foerster. But when I go into the press conference and hear the entire explanation, I did feel a little bit differently about it. I was not as frustrated as I was when I first read the quotes. Let me check. Oh, okay. I like this. Daza 0187. The 49ers showed what they value when they took Kinlaw over Wirfs. Daza's a YouTube channel member. By the way, if you want to become a YouTube channel member, please do. If you want to support us, it's less than $3 a month. You get priority comment response, custom emojis, and membership badges. That I think was a little different because they had such a need after trading DeForest Buckner that I think that they were like, this is such a gaping need. We have to fix this. And they went with Jauan Kinlaw, which we all know how that ended. Spoiler alert, not good. But this, I said going into the draft, the 49ers don't view the offensive line as huge a need as we did because they rushed to bring everybody back. And when you do that, it sends the message that you are confident in the guys that you had, that you thought they were good enough. And so that's why I had a little less hope, or not hope, but a little less inkling that they were going to force themselves to draft an offensive lineman in the first round of the draft. And by the way, they drafted Dominic Pooney in the 3rd round. It's not like they waited till the 7th round to draft it. So they did try and address it. Just wasn't right away. And they didn't trade up, I think, which is what a lot of people were expecting, or at least expecting them to go and get a tackle. I don't have the video of it, but Forrester also went on to talk about, with the offensive line, especially in today's game, you have to look for traits, right? You have to look for certain qualities that an offensive lineman has that translate to your system, because teams are doing a lot more spread stuff, and they don't do a lot of the things, at least for the 49ers, that the 49ers do at the college level. So you just sort of have to pick and see, does this guy have the traits, the qualities? Do we think he has the physical ability to do the things that we need him to do? So there's a lot of projecting. So you combine the projection with the fact that essentially the 49ers are just looking for offensive linemen that are tall enough to ride the bumper cars. And that's how sometimes you end up with some offensive linemen that can be frustrating, especially in must-pass situations. Now, the only problem in this equation for the 49ers is, like, if you are only shopping in the discount bin and then those picks don't work out, then what are you left with? Like, really, really bad players, right? Look at it this way. Mike McGlinchey was a top 10 pick. I think he was 9th overall, right? Clearly a big investment. You draft a guy in the top 10. If he doesn't live up to that potential, yeah, he may not be a superstar, but maybe his floor is just like decent NFL starter. Whereas if you're drafting a guy where best case scenario, they're a average player, if they really fulfill all their potential, well, if you don't hit on that guy, his floor is way lower. His floor is like can't play in the league. Like, liability is the floor. And then you're really in trouble, because if that's your offensive line, obviously that's going to destroy your whole offense. So, and Forrester did talk about that. He did mention that is sort of the pitfall of the philosophy. It doesn't lead me to believe that they're going to change their philosophy anytime soon, right? It doesn't lead me to, hell, if they weren't aggressive to go get an offensive lineman this year in the best lineman draft we've seen in a decade, they're probably not going to do it next year, right? Barring, I guess, some massive change that alters their thinking, but I don't see that. Lee Ving says, were they still waiting for Rosengard to fall to them, then overdraft Green on top of waiting? Forrester did say, and I'm sorry if you guys are seeing the comments like floating in the middle of the screen. I apologize. I don't know what's happening there. That's never happened before, but I can't figure out how to stop it. But Forrester did say we were waiting on some offensive linemen. We were ready to take some offensive linemen earlier, but they didn't end up falling to us. I think he was talking about Rosengarten. Honestly, I do. I think the 49ers would have taken him if he was there. I obviously don't know. That's conjecture on my part, but I think that they would have done that. Did they overdraft Green? I don't know. I've heard good things about Green so far. Look, it's just OTAs, so I don't know. But I've heard some good things about him. Take it for what it's worth. But Grant was saying he looked like one of the top corners on the team. I know a lot of people dislike Grant, but I don't think he blatantly lies about what's happening out on the field. So we'll find out about Green if he's overdrafted. I don't know. Let's see if I can bring up some of Levin's tweets about the situation, because I know he was all fired up. Yeah, here's one. Okay, let's bring this up on the screen, because Forrester said, hey, we've been able to develop guys on the offensive line. And I think that's what Levin took issue with. He said, did McGlinchey develop? Did School, Moore, Burford, Zakel, Banks, and McKivitz are the only 2 offensive linemen drafted to have arguments for being developed by the 49ers, and neither are above average. Pretty bold to say you can develop something when you've tried and failed at it. He's not totally wrong. McGlinchey never really improved as a player. He kind of was what he was for the most part, right? What do we always say? His run blocking is great, but his pass blocking needs work. And in must-pass situations where you couldn't do play action, he struggled mightily. School was a later round guy. They couldn't really get anything out of him. Burford hasn't really developed. He's the same guy. He had to split time his rookie year. He's splitting time last year. And then he lost his job ultimately to Feliciano. Zakel, we've been hearing whispers about, but I don't know. Let's see this guy. He's like a legend. And Aaron Banks is probably the best argument because he basically was inactive for huge chunks of his rookie year and then ended up being a starter for them last year. But I agree with Levin. I don't think Aaron Banks is like this great player. He went from being inactive to being a below average starter. Technically, that's development, I guess you could say, right? If you go from being terrible to just simply being below average, you've developed. The problem is how much. And I think it's particularly frustrating for fans to hear an offensive line coach say, hey, we found guys in the later rounds and developed them when one of the biggest plays in the Super Bowl came thanks to a failure from the offensive line. Now, again, that offensive lineman in Spencer Burford admits he didn't do the job he was supposed to do. So that has to go into the stew also. So we'll see. Lee Ving says Donovan West, future center. Yeah, that too. He was another guy. Joser says no Levin today on Twitch. Shout out to the Twitch fam. Yeah, no, Levin's on vacation this week. So no Levin today, unfortunately. For you guys anyway. You seem to like him. I'm doing just fine without him. Not saying. Just saying. All right. The other news of the day was another wide receiver contract. This one is to Jalen Waddle of the Miami Dolphins, who gets almost $36 million guaranteed at signing. And a lot of people, as they continue to point out, Joser says, I'm fine without Levin, turkey. There you go. A lot of people have pointed out, hey, the longer the 49ers wait on Brandon Aiyuk, the more money they have to give him. I personally think that the Waddle deal is probably where Brandon Aiyuk will ultimately end up, probably around there. I don't know that this pushes it significantly one way or the other. I did think it was a little interesting that Jauan Jennings got paid before Brandon Aiyuk. And I know it was a little easier to do Jennings' deal because of the restricted free agent tender and all that stuff. And he's ultimately, Jauan Jennings is not pushing for the kind of deal that Brandon Aiyuk wants. Brandon Aiyuk wants top of the league money. Jauan Jennings doesn't and would never have gotten it. So that does make it a little easier to negotiate that deal. But, it was like 49ers sign wide receiver. Woohoo! Jauan Jennings. Oh. No shade on Jauan. Got to feel good if you're Jauan Jennings, right? 7th round guy, spent the first year of your career on the 49ers practice squad. And not only do you get into the lineup and play and get, consistently as wide receiver 3, you're coming off the game of your life in the Super Bowl. Could have been the MVP of the Super Bowl. And now you're sitting down and you're signing a contract with $10.5 million guaranteed. That has to be damn exciting for Jauan Jennings. He's got to be thrilled. Like, that is a Disney moment. And good for him. He seems to be a good guy. Got to talk to him a little the week of the Super Bowl when we were out there. Seemed like a great guy with a great personality, and I'm happy for him. I'm definitely happy for him. I did see something from Matt Mayoko, who said, let me see if I can try and find it really quickly. I apologize. I like to bring stuff on the screen when I can. Basically, Mayoko's point was, now that they have signed Jauan Jennings, it's just a bigger indication that Deebo and Aiyuk won't be together long term, which isn't earth-shattering, I know, because we've all kind of thought that. But again, Mayoko speaks, I think, from the side of the organization most of the time. So when he's saying that, I almost feel like it's greasing the skids, kind of, like he's floating it out there for a reason, sort of like a brace yourselves because this sort of thing is going to happen. Regarding the Jalen Waddle deal, I'm trying to throw up a tweet here from David Lombardi, who tweeted, don't get lost in the average per year of these wide receiver deals. That's fluff. Here's the fully guaranteed money rank. Contracts signed this offseason are shaded in gray. Notice the most recently signed deals, are on the lower range here. I'll assume Brandon Aiyuk is shooting for nearer the top. Tyreek Hill got $52.5 million guaranteed. That's the top. A.J. Brown got a new deal in April. He's at 51. Calvin Ridley got one in March. He's at 47. Jerry Jeudy and Michael Pittman also got new deals in March. They're both at 41. Jalen Waddle, 35.9. Amon-Ra St. Brown's was in April. He got 34.7. And Devontae Smith and Nico Collins also signed for low 30s guaranteed money. If I'm Brandon Aiyuk, I think the Michael Pittman one. I mean, I could see Aiyuk saying, Jerry Jeudy and Michael Pittman got $41 million. What have they done that's comparable to what I've done, especially with what I've done in an offense where I am not the first option, not the second option, maybe not even the third option. I've produced, and these guys haven't, and they got paid. So how can the 49ers justify not paying me? I mean, Michael Pittman has 2,000-yard seasons, 15 total touchdowns in his career. He's never averaged more than 12.6 yards per catch. Brandon Aiyuk was leading the league almost basically the whole season until the last Week 17 game. It didn't count, and they started Sam Darnold and ruined it for him. Brandon Aiyuk has 2,000-yard seasons, 25 total touchdowns in his career, and like I said, 17.9 yards per catch. So I could see him being like, hey, I've done more than these guys. That's why with these contracts, you do want to do them because it only gets more expensive the longer you wait. As Fat Joe said,
yesterday's price is not today's price.
The longer you wait, the more the price goes up. Joser says, Stats, do you think they trade Deebo for O-line before the trade deadline? I doubt it. If their philosophy really is what Chris Foerster said, if you're not willing to use a high draft pick capital on offensive line, I doubt you're willing to trade Deebo Samuel for it, right? Because Deebo is more valuable than a random draft pick. So I doubt that they would. See, Pinky says Michelle's punching air right now over the Jauan Jennings contract. Lee Ving says, sign Aiyuk and Deebo balls out next season. Pearsall is mid. Then what? Well, then nothing. Everybody's under contract, Lee. So you'd be fine if you're the 49ers. Obviously, you might have to do some other moves at the roster, depending on how much the cap goes up and all that stuff. But, you know, you don't have to do something, especially if they, depending on how they structure the Brock Purdy deal. But we'll see. Let's cross that bridge when we get to it, though. Daza says if Deebo is traded, a lot of this makes sense. I don't know. I think the time for trading Deebo is past. I think if they were going to do it, they would have done it during the draft to get draft picks back so they could get immediate compensation for it. I don't see them trading Deebo for an offensive lineman, so I think that time has passed. They are going to get about $18 million more in cap room in a couple days once the calendar flips to June, thanks to the Eric Armstead release. Because remember, that was a post-June 1 release. So maybe they're going to get that cap room, and maybe they're going to announce the Brandon Aiyuk deal. Who knows? I certainly would love it from a business standpoint and from a fandom standpoint. Because I don't think that you want Aiyuk to have to go into this year without, you want resolution there one way or another, I think. And hopefully they get it. Moody Fortex says Chris Sims top 40. I want to see the Brock Purdy on the Sims quarterback list. I haven't seen it yet. I don't know if he updated more of it today. I am going to ask Chris to come on the show once Brock Purdy does appear on the list. If you've seen it, hit me up in the chat. Last I saw, he was down to 20 was the lowest. He had Caleb Williams at 20. Russell Wilson, 21. Derek Carr, 22. Daniel Jones, 23. Deshaun Watson, 24. Justin Fields, 25. I think that's as far as he's gotten. If, like I said, if you see it in the chat, let me know. It doesn't look like anybody has seen it yet. I'm interested to see where he puts Purdy. Again, full disclosure, I worked with Chris Sims for 7 years at Pro Football Talk. I've seen him put together the list. I've seen the amount of work he does with the list. It is not a clickbait thing for him. I promise you, he legit cares. And the story I always tell is the first year he ever did the list, when he just started, he started at 40 and, 40 to 35. And then after we did that show, he was like, I really put the 40th and 39. I really wish I switched those two guys. It really bothers me. I really think I made a mistake there, Stats. And I remember looking at him and being like, dude, it's the last two guys on the list. Don't beat yourself up over it. But he was, because he cares about this stuff. He goes out of his way to not be just like this clickbait trolley guy. So he does care about it. And so I'm interested to see where he puts Purdy. When I talked to Chris at the Super Bowl, which is an interview that's up on the YouTube channel, you can go check it out. Not now, this is our time. But he said that his opinion on Brock Purdy had changed a little bit, that Brock opened his eyes and showed that he was a little bit better than Chris initially thought, which I think also you have to give Chris credit for, because a lot of guys just stick with their original stance and pound it into the ground and ignore everything that contradicts that and only look at the things that support the opinion that they've put out there. So I give Chris credit for saying that Brock Purdy did impress him a little bit. So we'll see where he goes on the rankings. If I had to do it off the top of my head, man, I think he's going to be up there. I think he's going to be top 10. I think Chris is going to have him top 10. I really do. I hope he does. Like I said, I'll talk to Chris. I'll have him come on afterwards so he can explain and we can talk about it. Ultimately, does it really matter? No. You know, I was thinking of this. See, hold on. Bazimian? I don't know how to say that, but I apologize. Says, didn't Sims say that Kellen Mond was a great prospect in 2021? He has no credibility. If you're going to play that game, then Chris was also telling people to draft Patrick Mahomes high in the draft because he was going to be really good. In fact, he was telling Kyle Shanahan to draft Patrick Mahomes high in the draft. Kyle didn't listen to him. So if you're going to latch on to one thing that somebody says and act like they have to be perfect, you know, make sure you look at all the selections. I'll say that. Like, man, sorry, that bugs me. Yeah, he was wrong on Kellen Mond. Great. He was right on Patrick Mahomes, which is the bigger deal. I would say getting the second or third best quarterback of all time right before he was even into the league, probably a bigger deal than missing on Kellen Mond. Just saying. Don't pick out one thing and say, oh, well, this invalidates every other thing that a person could say about this position, because that's crazy to me. I'm seeing in the chat that Brock Purdy is 17. Daniel, are you saying that you've seen it on the list, or you're just saying that's your personal ranking? He usually tweets them out. 17, I think, would be pretty damn low, because 17 would be below average, right? There's 32 teams, so 16 would be directly in the middle. So if you're saying he's 17, then you're saying he's a below average quarterback. I can't get on board with that. I don't know how you could watch Brock Purdy and say he's below average. So if he really did put him at 17 on the list, then Chris and I are going to have a conversation, because I definitely disagree with that. And I look forward to that conversation. I'm sure it'll be awesome, but that seems really low to me. 17 would be really low. Daniel says, yes, that's where he has him on the list. Wow. I mean, good Lord. Sign Me 29 on Twitch says, we need to move on from Purdy. The last 16 quarterbacks to lose the Super Bowl in their first appearance have never been back. That doesn't bug me. Like, just because those guys haven't done it doesn't mean that Brock Purdy can't. So I don't think one has anything to do with the other. It's a good stat, I guess, but circumstances differ for all those guys, right? What was the team around him? How old were they when they made that first appearance? You know, there's a lot of factors that go into it. So that alone, I don't think gives you enough information to say we need to move on from Brock. Now, again, I've said I'm incredibly grateful that the 49ers can't pay him yet. I'm really looking forward to seeing this year. I want to see how he does. I want to see if he stays healthy. I want to see if he grows and improves in certain areas. So I love that they can't pay him yet, because I think they would if they could right now. If the 49ers were able to, I think they would pay Brock Purdy right now. I say it's too early to do that. There's no need to do that. There is no rush. They don't have to pay Brock Purdy after this year. They don't have to pay Brock Purdy after next year. Or they don't have to pay Brock Purdy the year after that, because they could franchise him for 2 years. The worst place to be is quarterback jail. I've said it before. Quarterback purgatory is not good, but it's better than quarterback jail, because quarterback purgatory gives you flexibility to make changes. If you're just throwing a bunch of guys in there and going through guys, that's not good, but at least you have flexibility. Quarterback jail is worse, because you're stuck with a guy that you know isn't good enough. Quarterback jail was Jared Goff with the Rams. That was quarterback jail. That's why they moved heaven and earth to get rid of him. Jimmy Garoppolo was quarterback jail with the 49ers. That's why they moved heaven and earth to get rid of him. Now, it didn't work. The guy that they got to get rid of him ended up not working out, but that doesn't mean that getting rid of Jimmy was the wrong thing. Those are two separate things. Daniel says Sims had Purdy below Baker and Kyler at 15 and 16. Ooh. Oh, boy. We're going to have some conversations about that one. Joseph says, I know it's not 49ers, but how's the house? Hope you can figure it out and that doesn't set you back. Yeah. Well, the financial hit's going to be significant, unfortunately. But we don't really have a choice, because you can't have water come down from your ceiling. Some things are deal breakers, as they say. But let's not worry about that. This is a 49ers chat. It's not a fix my house show. So we'll see what ends up happening. Don't worry. I'll keep you posted. Wow, 17 on the list is really, really low. Other things I took from the 49ers press conferences yesterday. Brian Schneider, their special teams coach, if you have time, and I put it in the what to watch in this morning's 49ers in 5. So if you need a link to it, just go to the 49ers in 5 from today and you can click the link. The special teams coach for the 49ers, Brian Schneider, could not be more excited about the new kickoff rules. Like, find something in your life that you love as much as Brian Schneider likes special teams and these new rules. He was incredible to watch, talking about how he's trying to figure it out, how special teams coaches around the league had Zoom meetings in the offseason to try and like game plan, like how's this going to work? What do we do? Who do we put in there? They're looking at everything. Like, he even said at one point, if you're not looking at this like a totally new play, then you're playing catch up. That was his exact quote. Like, it is completely uncharted territory. They're excited by it, but they don't know what the best things to do are going to be. And he said basically, like, the preseason is going to be all about adjusting. You make your plan, you do the best thing you can with the information you have, and they really won't know until the preseason. Because even in practice, it's kind of hard to simulate it. You need the live reps that only come in games. And once these games happen, you're going to see which teams shift quickly and evolve and adapt and copy other teams or take things from other teams. So it's going to be fascinating. Lee Ving says you have an indoor water feature. Yeah, thanks, Lee. The special teams thing is going to be fascinating because they don't know. And he's admitted like no one knows. And I think that's also kind of cool. Like, they're sort of on an even playing field with the rest of us in some ways. So it'll be interesting to see how the 49ers adapt. He wouldn't say who the returners are if he had guys that were like more favored than others. He wouldn't even speculate on that. And it could be anybody for the 49ers. It could be Deebo. It could be McCaffrey. It could be J.P. Mason. It could be Garendo would be a good kick returner. It could be they probably wouldn't put Brandon Aiyuk back there. It could be Jacob Cowing. Like, I'm fascinated. It could be different guys on different days, depending on who's kicking the ball off and depending on what they learn about the blockers. So everything is on the table from a special teams perspective. It was a really cool press conference just to learn like how his mind thinks and how they go about things in a totally unprecedented situation. Again, if you want to read it, it's in the description of the 49ers in 5 under one thing to watch. I thought it was really cool. C. Pinky says, I wonder how much input they got from the European League of Football. They have commitments with the NFL, and they've been playing this type of kick return since 2021, I think. He didn't mention that when he talked about like sources he's gone to try and figure it out. He mentioned the XFL, although he pointed out it's a little different than the XFL. But he didn't say European League of Football. I'm sure they're looking everywhere, to be honest with you. Jim Tomsula is the head coach of the current European League football champion. Good. Stay there, Jim. Another thing that we learned yesterday in the press conference is George Kittle was playing with his, whatever the injury was that caused him to get off-season surgery this year. He said he was playing with that since around week 9 or 10, which is obviously painful for George. He gutted it out. I will point out, the first thing I did when he said that was to go back and look. Week 9 was Jacksonville. George had 3 catches for 116 yards and a touchdown. And week 10 was Tampa Bay. George had 8 for 89 and a touchdown. So, damn, he came through in a big way those 2 weeks. Then he had sort of a down game against the Seahawks in week 11. Then 4 for 68, 3 for 76 and a touchdown, 2 for 54, 7 for 126 against Baltimore, and then 3 for 29 to close out the regular season. That's going to happen with George and with Deebo, probably. Like, even if they play, they're going to have injuries that kind of slow them down. And I hate to say it, but it's par for the course at this point. That's who they are. That's what their play style is going to give you. And luckily, the 49ers have an offense to where it didn't matter, right? Those games, I'll just read you the point totals for the 49ers. 34, 27, 31, 42, 28, 45, 19, 27, and 20. So, like, most of the time, they're able to put up points anyway. That's sort of the insulation that this offense has. When one guy's not at full strength, there's so many other good guys that they can pick up the slack. And I really think that's what you need. And I think it's even more so now this year, right? Because if Deebo or Aiyuk goes down or is banged up or slowed, instead of it all being on Jauan Jennings like it was last year, they have Ricky Pearsall. They have Jacob Coway. If McCaffrey goes down this year, which is very possible, yes, they have Elijah Mitchell. They also have Garendo. They also have Cody Schrader if he makes the team. I don't know if he will or not, but they seem to like him. So they're kind of insulated at those spots. So that's obviously very good. But remember, Kittle's a guy that does not like to get off-season surgery. He hates it. He's got a torn labrum in his shoulder that he refuses to get operated on because he likes the off-season to recover. He likes the off-season to work on his craft. So if he got that surgery, which obviously we know he did, clearly it was a significant injury and he wouldn't have been able to play otherwise. So it's a major injury. He also said that he'll be back for training camp assuming everything continues the way it has gone. So that's obviously good. Hooray, George Kittle. We love that. He talked about Jauan Jennings' new deal. I'm not going to dive into the Jennings deal too much. He got, an extension essentially of the money that he's going to make on the one-year tender. He was going to make 4.5, I think, on the one-year tender this year. So the Niners basically kind of duplicated that, gave him another year, and there you go, which is fine. Good for Jauan. It's, I don't know if I would have done it, but it's not like they're giving him so much money that it's incomprehensible. So that's fine. And we know Jauan can be a valuable piece. I'm interested to see how much he contributes this year as opposed to Ricky Pearsall. So we'll find out. But Jauan is a good player. Kittle talked about he's a good culture guy in the locker room, right? He sets the tone. He has the right attitude. He has the right commitment. He has the right physicality. So as long as you don't massively overpay for guys like that, and the 49ers didn't, it's fine. You're not going to hurt your team by doing that. And I think it helps maintain some of the culture. Excuse me. Especially, with some young guys coming in, the fact that they can look in that wide receiver room and have Deebo and Aiyuk and Jennings there and setting the culture and establishing things, that's going to make Ricky Pearsall that kind of guy and that kind of player. And that's what you want. That's how that culture continues. And that's how teams are able to go from one core to another because those values get passed on. George Kittle kind of talked about that in the tight end room, how he's setting the tone for Braden Willis and Cam Latu and all those guys. It's the same deal. Who's in the room with you at your position matters a lot. It's not just like, having one of those guys on your team. If you can have one of those guys in each position room, that really helps spread the culture. And the 49ers seem to have done that. That's going to do it for this edition of the show because I'm apparently losing my voice. I appreciate everybody for hopping in. Hope you got something out of this. Sorry, no Levin again today. He's on vacation. But I'll be back with Mimosa Michelle tomorrow, so don't worry about that, assuming my house is still in one piece. Hopefully it will be. But again, rate and review and follow the Gold Standard Podcast Network. Like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. Drop us a review. We will read it on the show. I am on all the socials at Stats on Fire. Please feel free to hit me up anytime. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday, everybody. We'll talk tomorrow.